I would be lying if I called Throne of Eldraine a perfect set. The set's abbreviation just wasn't obvious, and that tripped up a lot of people. Also, it had a lot of really broken cards. That too. Maybe I should have led with that. But I'm not here to complain about Oko and his elk. All there is to say about those cards has probably already been said. No, I'm here to talk about the real biggest problem with Eldraine. No talking animals. In this video, I'll outline why there are no talking animals in Eldraine and why I think that was a mistake. Speaking of mistakes, it would be one not to like and subscribe. Sorry. Across various articles, Throne of Eldraine's lead designer, Mark Rosewater, has outlined much about the set's inception and process. I've linked all sources used in this video below. Within these documents, we can get a clear picture of the decision not to include talking animals on Eldraine. The following dialogue, taken from one of those articles, perhaps illustrates it best. The dramatized interaction between Mark and Magic's creative team focuses on the topic of a Puss in Boots themed card.
So what exactly do you envision Puss in Boots looking like?
It's a cat dressed up like a swashbuckler.
So it's dressed in clothes?
Yes, it's Puss in Boots. He has to have boots at bare minimum.
And it talks?
Yes, he'll have awesome flavor text.
And it fights with a sword?
Yeah, he's really good with the sword.
I don't know.
It's cool that we somehow got footage of that. In general, Magic's creative team was adamantly against talking animals on Eldraine, which they described as crossing over the line. Further specifications were also given. Puss in Boots couldn't be a normal cat that a human had put clothes on, nor a Leonin, either. However, lots of mystical animals that had agency and could understand humans were allowed. Mark decided not to push the issue, as Eldraine was already an uphill battle to sell people on. To expand on that, he had the inkling of a fairy tale themed set as far back as 2005. He pitched it multiple times, but the idea was repeatedly rejected for being too juvenile. This continued as recently as 2015. That same year, a pitch from then-designer Sean Main for an Arthurian world was received very well. However, two problems with the concept ended up emerging. Firstly, the average person knows only a handful of elements of the legend, making it difficult to come up with a whole set's worth of engaging top-down designs. Secondly, while Magic has never done a strictly Arthurian plane before, they had utilized similar space in places like Dominaria and Bant. It would be a challenge to make another take on the idea exciting. Ultimately, a solution was agreed upon. By combining a fairy tale set with a Camelot set, two controversial parts could become a manageable whole. The new and expansive but risky fairy tale element could be the perfect counterpart to the safe and easily marketable, but perhaps shallow or boring Arthurian element. But the journey to get Eldraine published still faced hurdles. The general lack of faith in the fairy tale element of Throne of Eldraine led to a number of restraints being placed on it. Rejecting even the barest anthropomorphism of animals was one result of that, but not the only one. In general, the creative team feared the set would be too silly or inappropriate for Magic. At one point, they were unsure if the card Gingerbrute had crossed the line in this area, meaning Mark had to fight to sell them on it. The unproven nature of a fairy tale world was also one of the reasons it was only given one set. Finally, both the designers and their creative team had the challenge of determining what exactly constitutes a fairy tale. With how much of a tough sell Eldraine was internally, I understand why the design team chose to pick their battles. I'm happy that we got any fairy tale set at all. However, I find the creative team and Magic higher-ups' lack of faith in the concept frustrating. To be fair, I am saying this with the benefit of hindsight, but I believe I would make a similar argument at the time. From my perspective, these two parties have a very dated view of fairy tales, that they're exclusively for children. The use of descriptions like juvenile and too silly demonstrate this. I wouldn't be surprised if for many of them, their idea of a fairy tale starts and ends with picture books and classic Disney cartoons. However, the last few decades has majorly shifted how many people view fairy tales, with many different works recontextualizing them for older audiences to great success. Fables won a bunch of awards and led to The Wolf Among Us, a game that helped trick people into thinking that Telltale was a profitable company. Once Upon a Time was on air for 1,000 years. Shrek is the literal cultural epicenter of my generation for some reason. Hoodwinked exists. Even Disney films based on fairy tales now generally attempt to tell more complex stories and subvert certain expectations. Clearly, modern audiences are fully capable and willing to accept fairy tale stories with all the silliness they entail. Additionally, I find the talking animals are too inappropriate for the setting decision to be somewhat arbitrary. Throne of Eldraine, as it was released, is not an unsilly set. I don't see why players would accept cards like Bargain, Outmuscle, or Tall as a Beanstalk, but reject a few talking animal cards. The anthropomorphic animal adjacent cards don't feel out of place either. Keeper of Fables and Prophet of the Peak are likely some of the animals with agency that Mark discussed. I don't think anyone views them as borderline inappropriate. Finally, I mentioned at the beginning that there was one arguable exception to the no talking animals claim. Flutterfox has flavor text with a talking fox. However, it is quoting from an in-universe work of unknown veracity. This ambiguity is what likely led to it getting past the constraint. I'm not sure why it's the sole semi-exception though. In my opinion, it's a solid compromise, allowing a depiction of talking animals without giving up realism. And with that said, I think a fairy tale world without anthropomorphic animals is incomplete. So many classic fairy tales had to be ignored or recreated poorly. Some animals, like the big bad wolf, are represented well, but others, like the 3 little pigs, 3 bears, and 3 billy goats gruff, are unexciting creature tokens with basic or no mechanics, often overshadowed by their antagonists. Fortunately, with the warm reception to Eldraine's world building, I hold out hope that a future visit will inspire more internal confidence, and therefore be allowed to let loose a little more. We've seen Wizards tackle the same concept more than once before, so perhaps we'll get a redo on some of these animals one day. Even if we don't, there are plenty of unused talking animals for inspiration. I'm optimistic we'll get our Puss in Boots card one day. I'm holding out for a hero. Thank you to Ryan Gomez and Garrison for acting in this video. I'm sure you already know Ryan's channel, Magic Arcanum, but if not, I've linked it below and highly recommend it. How do you feel about the talking animals situation? Do you agree with the creative team that they don't belong on Eldraine? If not, are there any famous talking animals that you'd like to see? Please let me know in the comments, and consider liking and subscribing to support the channel. Thanks.